Imagine stepping onto the hallowed grounds of Yale University, where towering intellects chase dreams beneath ivy-clad walls and the air hums with the promise of tomorrow. Yet, in September 2009, this bastion of brilliance morphed into a stage for a spine-chilling enigma. A young woman, her heart alight with wedding bells just days away, slipped into oblivion without a whisper. Annie Lerr, a 24-year-old doctoral dynamo, was a star at Yale. Her mind ablaze with pharmacological breakthroughs, her horizon boundless. On the crisp morning of September 8th, she strode into her lab building, only to vanish into thin air. As the clock ticked mercilessly forward, dread gripped Yale's tight-knit world. Where had Annie gone? How could she evaporate from a fortress-like campus hub? Detectives plunged into a frantic hunt, combing through grainy security tapes, grilling peers, clawing for any shred of evidence. But each step peeled back layers of a nightmare too ghastly to fathom. What they unearthed jolted the nation, a revelation so sinister it stained Yale's gleaming legacy with blood. This is Annie Lou's haunting saga, a vibrant soul teetering on the edge of glory, snuffed out in a brutal betrayal that left a community shattered, a country reeling, and a cry for justice echoing through the ages. From a young age, Annie Marie Lerr was destined for greatness. Born in 1985 in San Jose, California, to a Vietnamese-American family, she quickly proved herself to be a brilliant mind. At Union Mine High School in El Dorado, California, she wasn't just a top student, she was the valedictorian and was even voted most likely to be the next Einstein by her peers. Her academic excellence earned her an impressive $160,000 scholarship, which she used to attend the University of Rochester in New York. There, she majored in cell developmental biology and minored in medical anthropology. It was during her time at Rochester that Annie met Jonathan Widorski, the man she planned to spend her life with. Their wedding was set for September 13th, 2009, a date she would tragically never see. Determined to push the boundaries of scientific discovery, Annie was accepted into Yale University's prestigious graduate program, where she pursued a doctorate in pharmacology. By the age of 24, she was already making waves in her field, studying the effects of medications on mice at Yale's School of Medicine. She seemed to have it all: a brilliant mind, a promising future, and a loving fiancé. But beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life, darkness lurked in the most unexpected of places. Just 5 days before her wedding, on the morning of September 8, 2009, Annie Lou followed what should have been a routine schedule. She left her apartment, boarded the Yale Transit shuttle, and arrived at Sterling Hall of Medicine on campus. Around 10 a.m., she made her way to her research lab on Amistad Street, stepping inside a secure university building, a moment captured on surveillance footage. But that was the last time anyone saw her. Hours passed, and there was no sign of Annie. She was known for being incredibly responsible, never one to miss appointments or run late without notice. By 9 p.m., concern turned to panic. When she still hadn't returned home, one of her 5 roommates contacted the New Haven Police Department to report her missing. What had started as an ordinary day had now turned into the beginning of a chilling mystery. The search for Annie Lou led investigators to Yale's highly secured Amistad building, a place monitored by approximately 70 security cameras and accessible only to those with a Yale ID. As police reviewed the footage, a chilling realization set in. Annie was seen entering the building, but never leaving. With growing concern, authorities locked down the area, launching a massive investigation. The FBI and Connecticut State Police joined in, combing through every lead. For 5 agonizing days, Annie's family held on to hope, praying for her safe return. But on September 13th, 2009, the very day she was meant to walk down the aisle and marry Jonathan Widorski, police uncovered a grim truth instead. Annie's lifeless body was found in the basement of the Amistad building. It is my tragic duty to report that a body of a female was found in the basement of the Amistad building late this afternoon. The identity of the woman has not yet been established, Yale President Richard Levin announced in a letter to students and staff. Annie was a brilliant, compassionate, and vibrant young woman with an exciting future ahead of her. Now, her family, who had been preparing for a joyous celebration, was instead facing an unimaginable tragedy. The investigation quickly honed in on a prime suspect, 26-year-old Raymond Clark III, the only person working in the lab with Annie on the day she vanished. Clark initially claimed he had seen Annie leave the Yale Animal Research Center carrying 2 bags of mouse food and a notebook. But as police dug deeper, a chilling timeline emerged. A 13-page arrest affidavit revealed damning evidence. Security card records tracked the movements of both Annie and Clark. Scratches were found on Clark's body, and forensic evidence suggested he had attempted to clean the crime scene and erase his DNA. Though the affidavit did not explicitly state a motive, sources close to the investigation told the Hartford Courant that Annie's murder stemmed from a work-related dispute with Clark. The records showed that between 10:40 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. that day, Clark moved between the lab where Annie had been working and another room down the hall a staggering 55 times. A crucial breakthrough came when fellow student Rachel Roth alerted Yale police to a suspicious discovery, a box of wipes with blood spots on it, sitting on a steel pushcart near the last location Annie had swiped into. But what happened next was even more alarming. According to the affidavit, Yale police officer Sabrina Wood observed Clark walk over to the cart and subtly turn the box so the bloodstains faced away from view. Sensing something was off, Wood kept her cool, casually engaging Clark in small talk, all while knowing she might be speaking to Annie's killer. As the search for Annie intensified, Raymond Clark III's behavior grew increasingly suspicious. Instead of assisting in the investigation, he was seen obsessively scrubbing the drain in the lab with steel wool and cleaning products. Yale University Sergeant J. Jones also observed Clark cleaning the floor beneath the sink, an area that was already spotless. Even more unsettling, Jones saw Clark handling the same pushcart where blood-stained wipes had been found. On September 10th, Clark came forward with a statement, claiming he had seen Annie leave the building 15 minutes before he exited, just before a fire alarm was triggered by an autoclave sterilizing lab equipment. But investigators weren't buying it. His account only deepened their suspicions, prompting them to obtain search and seizure warrants for his DNA samples, fingerprints, body hair, and fingernail clippings. A polygraph test sealed his fate. Clark failed miserably. Meanwhile, the FBI continued to build a damning case. Among the evidence collected was a box of wipes with bloodstains and an oversized lab coat with red stains, found discarded in a recycling bin. Surveillance footage confirmed Clark had been wearing a similar lab coat earlier that day. However, when he left the building, he had changed into different clothing. Investigators then turned to Annie's apartment, retrieving personal belongings, including a toothbrush, to compare DNA samples. The results left no room for doubt. The blood on the wipes and the lab coat belonged to Annie Lou. Clark was no longer just a person of interest. He was the prime suspect in a murder that had shocked the Yale community. Just when investigators thought they had gathered all the evidence, a breakthrough came on September 12th. Hidden above a hallway drop ceiling outside the lab, police uncovered a chilling discovery: a blood-stained rubber glove and a sock. Nearby, they found a pair of work boots covered in blood, labeled with the initials Ray C, along with a blue hospital scrub shirt identical to the one Clark was seen wearing in surveillance footage. Despite the mounting evidence, Annie's body was still missing. Then, a sharp-eyed investigator noticed a foul odor near a utility panel in the lab. Acting quickly, authorities brought in cadaver dogs, who wasted no time in leading them to a horrifying scene. Behind the panel, concealed with insulation, lay the body of a female. She was still wearing surgical gloves, but her panties had been pulled down to her ankles. Her jaw and collarbone were broken, and blood splattered the surrounding walls. Investigators recovered even more damning evidence near the concealed body: a blood-stained lab coat, a sock identical to the one found in the ceiling, and a green ink pen. But the most incriminating find of all was a stain on the sock that contained both Annie's and Clark's DNA, tying him even more directly to the brutal crime. The forensic puzzle was coming together, and the truth behind Annie's tragic fate was undeniable. With mounting evidence against him, the investigation closed in on Raymond Clark III. On September 15th, authorities searched his Middletown apartment, collecting DNA samples that would soon provide the final, damning link. Among the forensic matches was a semen sample found at the crime scene, sealing Clark's fate. 2 days later, on September 17, 2009, police tracked him down to a Super 8 motel in Cromwell, Connecticut, where he was arrested without incident. Charged with murder, he was immediately remanded to the McDougall Walker Correctional Facility in Suffield to await trial. Initially in January 2010, Clark maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty. But as the weight of the evidence bore down on him, he changed course. In a stunning courtroom moment on March 17, 2011, Clark sat expressionless before a packed room of reporters alongside Annie's grieving fiancé and family. His fiancée, Jennifer Hromadcom, sat beside his parents, watching in silence as he quietly admitted to his crimes. Clark pleaded guilty to the murder of Annie Lou, as well as attempted sexual assault. In exchange for his confession, he struck a deal with the court, receiving a 44-year prison sentence. He would remain behind bars until 2053, his freedom lost, just as Annie's life had been stolen from her. Tears filled the courtroom as about 20 members of Annie Lou's family sat in silence, clutching handkerchiefs, bracing themselves for the moment they had been dreading. Before the judge imposed the sentence, Annie's grieving parents, Vivian Van Ley and Huang Lei, delivered heartbreaking statements, their voices heavy with sorrow. But the most striking moment came when Raymond Clark III, the man responsible for their unbearable loss, stood to speak. His voice wavered as he addressed the courtroom, tears streaming down his face. "I take full responsibility for my actions," he began, his words barely above a whisper. "I alone am responsible for the death of Annie Lou and for the pain I have caused to all who loved her." His attempt at remorse continued. "I have always tried to do the right thing and stay out of trouble, but I failed," he admitted. "I took a life and continued to lie about it, while Annie's friends, family, and fiancé sat and waited." His voice cracked as he went on, insisting that he never intended to harm anyone. "All I wanted was to be a good son, a good brother, and a good fiancé, but again, I failed." With each word, the weight of his crime hung in the air. "I blame only myself, and there are no excuses for what I have done," he said, before offering a final, hollow attempt at remorse. "Annie was and will always be a wonderful person, by far a better person than I will ever be in my life." His voice trailed off as he muttered his final apology. "I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I ruined lives. And I'm sorry for taking Annie's life." But in the eyes of those who had lost her, no words could undo what he had done. Superior Court Judge Roland Fasano acknowledged the unbearable grief that filled the courtroom, stating, "The suffering, the anguish of the families is heartbreaking." He emphasized that the plea agreement was a fitting resolution, not only because it carried a substantial sentence, but also because it spared Annie's loved ones the agony of a lengthy and painful trial. For murder, 44 years to serve. For attempted sexual assault in the first degree, 20 years to run concurrently, Judge Fasano declared, sealing Clark's fate. Today, Raymond Clark III remains behind bars at Cheshire Correctional Institution in New Haven County, Connecticut, where he will spend the majority of his life reflecting on the monstrous crime that shattered so many lives. On September 26, 2009, family and friends of Annie Lou gathered in the serene Sierra Nevada foothills of California, near the place she once called home. The Holy Trinity Catholic Church in El Dorado Hills, located about 30 miles east of Sacramento, overflowed with mourners paying their final respects. This service followed an earlier memorial held back east, where Jonathan Widowski, Annie's fiancé, arrived carrying red roses, a heartbreaking symbol of the love they would never get to share. With his head bowed in sorrow, Jonathan sat among the grieving, surrounded by those who cherished Annie and the incredible light she brought into their lives. Annie was remembered as a woman beaming with life, whose passion for science and medicine had been driven by a mission to find cures for diseases. Through tears, her mother, Vivian Van Ley, shared memories of singing lullabies to her daughter as a child before reading a heartfelt poem in Vietnamese, later translated by Annie's brother, Chris. "Farewell, my child. "The most wonderful gift that God sent to me," she said, her voice heavy with pain. Describing her daughter's tragic death as a knife searing through my soul, she then turned to Jonathan, offering him words of comfort. "John, even now Annie's gone, but I still have you and love you very much. You are my son." Jonathan, serving as head usher, stood among the more than 600 people who came to honor Annie's memory. Monsignor James Kidder, once Annie's pastor, delivered words of solace to those left reeling from her loss. "If we take those special qualities of hers and continue to make them our own, then she will continue to live in us," he said. In his closing words, he reminded the mourners that Annie's worth was never measured by the length of her life, but rather the intensity of love she brought into the world. Picture a moment of pure joy, Annie Lee, radiant and full of hope, just days away from saying "I do," her wedding dress waiting to embrace her dreams. But in a twist no one could foresee, that bliss shattered into a nightmare within the walls of a renowned university lab, a sanctuary turned sinister. Annie wasn't merely a gifted scholar, she was a cherished daughter, a loving fiancée, a beacon of friendship. With ambitions to revolutionize science, those closest to her painted her as compassionate, driven, and brimming with vitality. Her tale is a gut-wrenching wake-up call. Even in havens of intellect and safety, shadows can strike without warning. Annie Lou deserved a lifetime of brilliance and love, yet fate dealt her a cruel hand, transforming her story into a chilling lesson of broken trust and a stolen destiny. Let her memory endure as a clarion call, to honor her light and fight for a world where such horrors never again snuff out a soul so bright. If you found this video compelling, leave a like and your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and watch our other videos.